Hey, everybody. Welcome to Mile High Sports
Why'd
today.
you stop my music? Dang it, Danny.
Hey, you know,
That's my jam.
There we go. Nate Lundy next to me, well rested and ready after the long holiday weekend, apparently. Nate,
that is some porn-tastic music right there. I'm not going to lie. That is just a...
Or 1970s golf. Same kind of thing.
That is
it's like golf music.
That's some good stuff right there.
From the
you look a little tan. You were at the Rockies game over the weekend. You got some sun, didn't you?
I was. Yeah, I can't avoid not getting sun. I either look like lobster or vampire. These are the two colors I got.
I was camping over the weekend, which is why I've got a little bit of the sunshine there. Glow.
You had more fun than I did because I watched the Rockies get smoked 6-1.
Oh, but that's just what happens.
Yeah, but you know, whatever. You're gonna live with that.
I appreciate the fact that you, as a fan, Sean, punched the time card of attendance at 20th and Blake. I did that earlier this summer. My sister and my nephew visiting from London.
Oh, so you're bringing in family?
Yeah, my 5-year-old nephew absolutely is obsessed. Yes, he's obsessed with American baseball, and so he loves
British baseball.
To go,
it's not like there's American football. That's different.
It's not that. It's that my brother-in-law, his dad, is a huge cricket fan.
Okay.
So my nephew has learned cricket, but he likes coming when he comes to visit us here in the States. He likes going to a baseball game. He was very confused.
It doesn't take 3 days.
Right. But he was also very confused because let's see, it was 2 years ago when they were here for Christmas. He didn't understand why we couldn't go to a baseball game in the end of December. He was very confused by that.
Right.
We had to explain to him that they didn't play.
They don't play right now.
Right now. But yeah, so I hope everybody had a great 3-day weekend. I hope that you put together a very nice parlay of college football underdogs because holy cow, there are a lot of upsets.
That's the week to do it, right? Week 1. That's the week.
And I told y'all, take Idaho State and the points against Oregon State. I told you. So
my finger kind of fits in here. Where did you tell people?
I mean, I told people on the pod.
Right there.
I think I told people here with you. I kept telling everybody. I was like, I'm telling you, Oregon State's going to win, but they never cover when they start the season.
What pod?
The Fade 5
ever.
The Fade 5. I'm sorry. I just go with. I'm always like, oh, people listen to my podcast with me and Brad Evans.
Yeah, you want new listeners as well, right? So
yes, I would take.
Yeah,
I would take
5 with Nate and Brad Evans, both fine men and fine analysts.
Sean, with the same excitement that my daughter has, that Spirit Halloween is starting to pop up all over town.
It's been around for a month.
Welcome to kickoff week.
Yes, for the NFL, here we are. The Denver Broncos, now 7 consecutive losing seasons, 8 without the playoffs. Obviously, the only team that's worse with that is the Jets. And the Jets don't have the excuse of winning the Super Bowl before that streak started. That, of course, is the Denver Broncos road. And we have to see if things will start turning around. The rebuild, and it is a rebuild. You don't worry about what the Broncos are saying about it. It's what they're doing. And when you look at the moving away from players like Justin Simmons and trading Jerry Jeudy away for pennies on the dollar, you're rebuilding. And that's what the Broncos are doing. Quite frankly, it's the right thing to do. Out at training camp, when you and I did this, Nate, we've talked about it, and it was the right thing to do then as well. But now that the Broncos have dispelled the notion that there was ever a quarterback competition, and Bo Nix will start on week 1, as you said it would, as I said it would, as Cody Roark, who will be joining us in a couple minutes, said that would happen. Now it's for real. And for the Broncos, the idea of jumpstarting this season, you talk about those underdogs winning games. The Denver Broncos are the underdogs, of course, they're on the road against Seattle. It's a tough place to play. We all know that. But Seattle has a new coach. They still have the same old Geno Smith. They have a defense that's going to be changed up a little bit. Is there an opportunity here for the Broncos, who seem to be at least all on the same page for the first time in many years, from ownership all the way down to the players? Are they one of those teams that might surprise this weekend? I feel like they've got a shot.
No, not at all.
Wow. Okay.
No,
so we have something to discuss this week.
Well, I've said it before. I'll continue to say it. We will talk about it later on in the show. And what'll happen is Cody, who's like right over there, by the way.
You can't see him. He's off screen.
He's off screen right now, but he's right over there. Cody will come in here and he's going to say that I'm full of crap, and that's okay. I have absolutely no issue with that because frequently I am.
Cody's having some winning 10 games, by the way.
Yeah, I know. That's because
this would have to be one of them.
That's because Cody is on some sort of weird.
That's not true.
Remember the scene in Young Guns when they're all like, "Do you see the size of that chicken?" That's kind of what I think is happening with Cody right now. To think they're going to win 10 games, but more power to him because I love that. I just don't think that's going to be the case. I think that this team has a lot stacked against them, not the least of which is that 9 of their 17 games are on the road. I've said before that I think that's one of the problems and why I think they're going to struggle to be able to win games is because you're taking a rookie quarterback this Sunday and you're sticking him in what I believe is the biggest home field advantage in the National Football League, and that is Lumen Field. Period. Like, I'm not going to go a whole lot more in depth right now. Like, we'll talk some more about some of the matchups and those kinds of things. And Cody's writing about it and talking about it at milehighsports.com. But I believe Seattle is the biggest home field advantage in the National Football League. And you are going to take a rook and you're going to send him there. And I just think the fans are smart there. I think they know what they're doing. I think they're going to make a lot of noise. I think they're going to make it really difficult on him. And yes, there's a lot that Sean Payton can do this week to get Bo ready for that. But it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to translate into a victory. I've said before, I will continue to harp on this show. I believe this team is going to be exponentially more fun to watch. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to win. Those are two completely different things. Broncos fans have been begging for this team to just be entertaining. Give me something, man.
That's a good point.
Give me something. Okay? Another analogy for you. Every year when the Rockies start, the joke amongst all of us in the media is, please, could you just be competitive until the Broncos start their training camp just to give us some sort of entertainment over the course of the season? So the analogy I'll give you with the Broncos is, can you still be in it when the fourth quarter starts? Maybe late in the third quarter?
I was going to say
that's all I want.
Avs and Nuggets started, but you're just going into game one.
I'm talking about but I'm talking like game by game. I'm talking game by game. Can you make sure that you are there, you're entertaining, you're having fun all until late third, early fourth quarter? And then after that, I'm going to flip a coin because I think there's still a lot of question marks on this team. Maybe you get lucky against some folks. I believe this team can go 500 at home. I do believe that.
Well, that would go a long way till getting them over that 6-point win, but a six win season. But that's obviously not going to get them into the playoffs either. Now, I'm with you, Nate, on that. I think that the key for the Broncos, step one, is to be entertaining. You have regained Broncos fans' interest with Bo Nix and him winning the starting job right off the bat. He rarely won it when he was drafted and anointed as the starter then, because only, you don't talk about drafting a guy in the first round anymore and not play them, especially when you don't have anyone better. And I don't mean to harp on it very much, but we didn't get a chance to talk about Jarrett Stidham, who made the team along with Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson and Stidham, both free agents at the end of this year. Wilson paid a lot less than Stidham in this case, Stidham making the second year of his 2-year, $10 million deal. Stidham made a statement that I got Will Barton flashbacks when Stidham basically complained that
that's terrible.
He thought that he saw himself as a starter and he was disappointed he wasn't named the starter. I don't know how he didn't read the room. We were telling everyone by the time that Bo Nix was selected that he was going to be the starter. I realized that if you're Jarrett Stidham, you've played your career and you've started only 4 games in your career, you feel this was your best chance to probably become a starter. It's one of the reasons you came to Colorado in the first place. You knew that Russell Wilson wasn't going to be Sean Payton's favorite, and you thought you were going to get a look. And I think he really did get a look, but I think Nix is exactly what Sean Payton wants in a quarterback. And I worry a bit, and maybe this is unfair, but I remember the second, anyone who's followed me for the last decade plus here doing this in town knows that I was not the biggest Will Barton fan, and it had something to do with this game and it had something to do with this approach. But when Will Barton those years ago came out and said like he wasn't going to go to the bench, he saw himself as a starter, and the Nuggets capitulated to that and let him be a starter as sort of a poor man's J.R. Smith, except shooting you out of more games than shooting you in. That's when, to my mind, it was time to move on from Will Barton. It took the Nuggets too long to do it. Now, it's not going to take the Broncos too long to do it, because if Zach Wilson shows you anything, as we've discussed here, the Broncos are going to go with Bo Nix and Zach Wilson as their 2-quarterback combination for the next few years. No one else is going to want to try to pick up Wilson. The Broncos, if Wilson is happy here and understands his role, Wilson's not going to get a starting job. This is a good fit. That's what the Broncos want to do. It's what the Broncos will do. To my mind, once Stidham kind of had that moment, which is a human moment, and I understand it, and maybe he's already over it and decided I'm going to be the best backup I can. I would be looking to trade Jared Stidham, who's on a 1-year deal, for a palatable number the second that a team suffers a quarterback injury. And they will, Nate. 66 quarterbacks started games last year. If I were the Broncos, I'd be looking to that. Because if you really want to see what Zach Wilson can do and can't do as your backup, make him the actual backup. Now, with all three being active, worse something happened to Bo Nix, Sean Payton can just kind of go by whatever he feels at the time. But I think the writing's on the wall here. And were I the Broncos, I would have my radar up for any sort of deal in which I can move on from a guy that's making a good chunk of money on a rebuilding team who isn't going to be here next year anyway. The kind of things we hoped the Broncos might have done with Jerry Jeudy and maybe even Justin Simmons last year instead of losing Simmons for nothing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the smart things. I just don't think there's any value to Stidham. So
not until somebody gets hurt.
Yeah, but even then you're.
Well, wouldn't you take a 6th or even a 7th for a guy you're not going to keep?
I mean, I'd be okay with it, but I think at this point that's also like, well, okay. I guess I absolutely see your point, and I do think it's Wilson that should be the backup. I think Stidham just had a moment. I don't chalk a lot of it up. But I mean, damn, dude, you compared him to Will Barton.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Hey, Will Barton started a whole bunch of games. Will Barton was a starter for a while.
That's rude.
Why? Just because Will Barton was out of the league? Well, like within 18 months of getting traded?
I'm on the same boat you are with Will Barton. Wow.
That's the last time I'd seen something like that. When the guy didn't get his job and he kind of threw a little fit about it. And I get it. It's human nature. I do. So I don't want to read too much into it, but knowing that that's a guy the Broncos aren't looking to go forward with for long-term anyway, I'd look at a trade potential as soon as the option became available.
Well, find out what Cody thinks.
I will.
That is what is coming up, because he's right there.
On the other side.
He's right over there.
Our lead writer for Mile High Sports, of course, host of the Locked On Broncos podcast, and you catch a lot of what Cody does right here at Mile High Sports. Obviously, looking forward to having him with us every single week in studio to break down a little bit more. And we'll just go ahead and we'll do that. We'll make that switch right here on Mile High Sports today. Nate Lundy will be back and joining us in just a couple. But I want to remind you while we change things over that if you're looking for the perfect place to work, play, exercise, and socialize, then look no further than the Denver Athletic Club, right in the heart of downtown Denver. You know it. It's been there for more than 100 years, and there's reasons for that. As a DAC member, you'll enjoy top-notch amenities like a full fitness center, licensed childcare center, spa, massage, Pilates, a golf simulator, and more. A lot more than you might expect from just a place where you're going to get your workout in. But what truly sets the DIC apart is its vibrant community. This member-owned club is all about you, offering year-round social events, co-working, dining, fun for the entire family. The Denver Athletic Club is truly a club for your whole life. And for a limited time right now, new members will pay $0 in initiation fees. Remember, the fall's coming up, winter's coming up. You're going to want to spend more time inside working out and then taking advantage of everything else the DAC has to offer. So go check them out. $0 in initiation fees for one of Colorado's most famous and famed institutions, the Denver Athletic Club. Go check them out. $0 in initiation fees as we speak. The club for your whole life. So give them a look. Joining us now is the lead writer for the Mile High Sports, covering the Denver Broncos, and the host of the Locked On Broncos podcast, which you can check out every weekday from Cody Roark right here. Cody Roark, NFL. Cody, you spent a lot of time with us every day out at training camp. Really appreciated that. It's nice to have you here.
Say master of the ad read over there. My
in
goodness.
Studio. Yeah, well, you've done it. I've done it a couple times.
I do it every day. I know the feeling. It's fun.
You get used to it after a while. But looking at the Broncos now as we get into the first game week, a lot of the things that we talked about would happen at training camp have happened. Bo Nix is the starter. Bo Nix did not play in the final preseason game, as we both suggested. Nix is going to be the day one guy. Now,
Big Nix energy, they say?
Yeah, you could say that. There's nothing inappropriate. Hey, Nate literally came in and compared our intro music to porn. So I think you can say Big Nix energy. So I think we're okay there. But The opportunity here for Nix is big. The opportunity for the Broncos is big. But I think it is telling that there were a lot of people in our field that thought that even if Nix had been named the starter in between the second and third preseason games, that he would still play a little bit because he's a rookie and needed the reps. Does the fact that he didn't tell you anything other than the fact that Sean Payton found QB1 and I'm not going to risk him getting hurt in a meaningless game?
Yeah, no, correct. And look, I think the writing was kind of on the wall there. I think for Sean, bigger picture was he wanted to get a deeper look at, okay, he already knew Bo's going to be the starter, but who's going to be the backup? That right now is still undecided. And look, it was Labor Day yesterday.
And you don't have to decide because all three are on the active roster.
Yeah, and look, everyone had the day off except me and the Broncos, and we were on a conference call with Sean. Sean was asked about the backup quarterback job and if that's settled. He said, look, I'll settle it and then I'll keep you posted. Like that, the vibe kind of changed from Sean. So it's like, all right, hey, it's game week. Sean is locked in here. I imagine something will come out this week potentially on who the backup is going to be, because you do want that role defined. But I think you make a great point right there saying, oh, well, there's three guys on there. You really don't have to name a backup.
And if you're Sean Payton, you like keeping stuff close to the vest. I mean, why not? Right.
And so I think for Denver going into this week, I think we're all excited that, hey, like finally game week is here. We've been looking forward to this for quite some time. They didn't want to risk Bo out there. And why would you? You know, I think you saw enough from Bo in the first two preseason games to say, okay, hey, I feel comfortable with what I've seen. And certainly when you look at it, granted the preseason, I think sometimes people look at, they played this team. Bo in that first game against the Colts did play against some of Indy's starters for a series, and then everyone else rotated in. But you got to get reps, you got to play. And I've been saying it all preseason long. It's not about who you play, it's about how you play, because the narratives and the optics in this game are constantly changing, right? For example, let's say Bo went out there, played against backups and third string guys, struggled. The narrative would be, well, he looks like a bust. He can't do it against these guys. He goes out there and he plays the way that he has. It's like, oh, well, he's playing against these guys. So it's like the optics of it, you can never win. But I will say this, I'm an Oregon Ducks fan. So for me, watching how they played this past week, and my biggest
takeaway. Does Nate Lundy know that?
Yeah,
by the way?
Oh, yeah.
He does?
I know he's a Beavers fan. Civil War, we might have to do a bet this year to see that. Though I am rooting for one guy on the Beavs. His name is Don Montiel, quarterback.
Okay.
His dad was my coach, so he ended up going. He led my alma mater, to a state championship.
Way to soften that with the boss man. Good plan.
We try. But I'd say like watching that Oregon game, I started thinking to myself, I'm like, man, they're really missing a guy like Bo Nix. Like Bo was a hard guy to replace. And look, they got Dylan Gabriel in there, but I was like, the offense runs different without Bo. And that was a little bit of a surprise to me. And granted, I think that's going to be natural. The way he commanded the offense there in Oregon the last 2 years, I mean, he transcended it. He took him to the heights that they haven't seen in quite some time. So maybe that's a good sign here for the Broncos. I think from what I've seen from Bo, the cerebral processing, how mature he is, and just talking to his teammates, they'll say like, hey, he is so even keeled. Like, he comes out here and if he makes a mistake, he never makes the same mistake twice, which I'd say, like watching every practice, there were times I documented when Bo would make a mistake, like the interception or, this type of throw. He wouldn't do that the second time. Like he was very consistent with the operation. So I think that Denver's in a good spot and now sets the table for him to begin his NFL career in a loud, hostile environment in which Broncos players told me the other day that Seattle is the loudest place they've ever played. Like all the guys that were here. It's
even measured with the NFL. There's always a bit of a tug of war between Seattle and Kansas City.
2 years ago, in Seattle. And I just remember from the moment, and granted, maybe it had something to do with Russell Wilson, his return to Seattle.
Might have had something to do with it.
Yeah. But from the moment he ran out of that tunnel to, I think we got to the point, like the end of the game after they won, it was still loud. Like it reverberated. The press box shook. And I imagine we might see a little bit of that coming up. I think this game is going to be loud, but it's also a new look Seahawks team. They have a new defensive coordinator. They have a new head coach.
Right.
I mean, really, their defense coordinator is their head coach. But the question is like, what is this team going to look like? They have a wide variety of receiving options. So it's going to be a challenge here for Denver.
One of the things you brought up about Nix that I think is important when you're talking about any rookie is the idea that, you can make a mistake, but you don't make it twice. Bo Nix will make rookie mistakes. I think we agree on that. He's going to make rookie mistakes. Every quarterback does. But the question is, will he continue to make them again? And I agree he's not. One of the things that I think was overlooked with Nix, and you talk about the mental aspect of the game, and sometimes that can be overrated too.
Yeah.
It can be. You'd ideally like to have
too much sometimes.
Right. But in this case, one of the things that gets lost from Nix last year, he was the winner of the William V. Campbell Trophy. And it's not as famous as the Biletnikoff or certainly the Heisman or the Outland or any of the trophies you're accustomed to at the end of the college football year. But it's an important one. And what it is it's basically it's a National Football Foundation award. It's been handed out, by the way, since 1990. So it's not exactly new. And it's given to the college football player at the best combination of academics, community service, and on-field performance. In fact, its nickname is the Academic Heisman. So you're talking about a guy with the most starts in the history of college football, and a guy that, when you consider the GPA, the fact that he handles his off-field business extremely well, works with charitable organizations. He's 24 already, married. New homeowner. Congratulations there as well. But you're talking about the kind of player that in theory should be able to make that leap and not make those mistakes twice. If you were to go look at quarterbacks, and I'm not making the one-to-one comparison because there are plenty of reasons you shouldn't, but if you're Sean Payton and you're looking for things you're familiar with, this is what you saw in Bo Nix. Drew Brees, height, speed, raw arm strength. Were these things that Drew Brees was renowned about coming out of college? No. What you were talking about was ability to read defenses, quick release, accuracy.
Yeah.
Same things we're hearing Velocity. About Bo Nix.
Yeah.
So that part, I think, is very exciting for Broncos fans. Now, it's not me. I mean, you're saying that Bo Nix is going to be Drew Brees. In fact, the odds are 99% that he will not be Drew Brees.
Yeah. He's going to be Bo Nix, folks.
Right. And that may be enough, because when you have the coach and quarterback pairing, and I look over here, I wonder a little bit if a training camp, some of the folks at ESPN were maybe catching you and me. The idea of a quarterback that is maybe underwhelming and then fits in a scheme. Look at Brock Purdy, former Mr. Irrelevant, sitting over in San Francisco, taking them to Super Bowls because he's a stylistic fit with Kyle Shanahan. Yeah. If he's on another team, we probably don't know who Brock Purdy is.
That's a good point. I mean, I think too, like, and Purdy came out of nowhere. Like, I think the moment that Purdy came in, we were starting to think like, oh, like Jimmy Garoppolo's down. Who's this Brock Purdy guy? And
the last guy, the 7th round guy they picked, they're just, hoping he to keep it going.
And Brock, I think Brock is in a great system. And look, I think that's the thing that we talk about systems. We also talk about players. It's a mesh between the two, right? And look, for Sean Payton, it's not just Sean saying, hey, I'm going to run my offense. Sean's going to have the foundational pieces of his offense incorporated in here. But another thing he's also going to do is he's going to fit what his players can do into his scheme. It's not necessarily, and we always talk about this as a coach, in terms of our coaching staff, it's not about, the X's and O's, it's about the Jimmys and Joes. It's about the guys that you have there. And if you don't have the guys that can sustainably run your system, you are going to fail. Like, you're not going to do it. And at the NFL level, I think it's even more difficult to just say, hey, we're going to run a system and try to fit guys into it. You need to have pieces that are like adaptable. It's got to be flexible in that. But I think with Bo, you're getting somebody who can run what Sean Payton runs from an offensive schematic standpoint.
And we saw him run at Auburn prior to the transfer to Oregon. And even at Oregon a little bit.
There were concepts of it.
For references, Purdy's last 2 years averaged just under 3,000 yards a season and 19 touchdowns in both years. So not overwhelming. But you know what Brock Purdy and Bo Nix have in common? Games started. Brock Purdy started all 4 years, 48 games. Now, Sean Payton, we know, comes off the Bill Parcells tree. Parcells famously talked about what do you evaluate about quarterbacks? The top line thing he mentioned is starts. Because if you were the best quarterback on your team and you had to go out there and play, that's the best measurement of success.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that we talked about this, both you and I, and over the course of training camp, don't worry about necessarily the idea of sitting and learning, because Peyton Manning talked about it himself. The best way to learn is to play, to do, like anything else you do in your life. You have to do it. And so I think when you look at a Purdy and you look at a Nix and you think, well, how will they be much better at the NFL level? Sometimes it's just about the experience level and the maturity. And I think there is a similarity there to keep in mind for Broncos fans. If you look at certain metrics, Brock Purdy's a top 5 quarterback in the league. I'll be honest, I don't think any GM, if you were to redraft the league, picks Brock Purdy as a top 5 quarterback.
No.
But for the Niners, he gets the job done. And for the Broncos and Sean Payton, Bo Nix could very well do the same.
Yeah, he could. And look, Bo could also ascend it to a top talent. I think he's got the potential to do it, right? And look, I think we got to crawl before you walk in terms of how we look at this. And certainly, I like what, we were at the groundbreaking for the new Broncos park powered by Common Spirit, the new team renovations that,
look who's good at ad reads all of a sudden.
Oh, fantastic. They've done the renovations here. Like, it's going to take 2 years. It's going to be a long process. But the one thing that when we were meeting, we had a little scrum with Broncos owner and obviously CEO Greg Penner. And one thing that Penner said was, when Sean announced Bo as a starter, he said, I called him up and I told him, through the ups and downs, we're going to stand by your side. We're going to support you. Like, that is huge. Like, this has been something that's been missing from the Broncos for quite some time. But it also tells me, and I hope Broncos fans take this and also absorb this. Like, ownership knows that this position, quarterback, you're going to have highs, you're going to have lows, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to not look great at all times. Even when that happens, having an organization stay committed to you is so big. And Denver has not done that. Obviously, the quarterback carousel graphic has been a thing.
5 head coaches in the last handful of years, too. So
this process is different from the Walton Penner family ownership group. They're firmly behind Sean Payton, George Payton, and Bo Nix. Is that three kind of headed brain trust here for the offense going forward? That's going to be huge. Bo's going to make mistakes at times this year. That doesn't mean like, okay, hey, just because he throws it out, he's a bust. Like, I think that people got to keep it in perspective. The game is very complex. He's going to have highs, he's going to have lows. Just got to keep growing with it.
The point you make is really important because when you talk about the idea of the quarterback, well, really all the way through this, when you've been in your middle of the ocean treading water, right? Maybe you can't see the land, but at some point you have to pick a direction and swim as hard as you can. And the Broncos finally in that allegory have picked a direction. They're all going in the same direction. Ownership, the general manager, the head coach, the team, even moving into this youth movement. We'll talk about that a little bit in a moment, has some value here because everybody's on the same page. When everyone's pulling on one end of the rope, you don't know when you'll get to where you'll get to, and you don't even know if the destination is exactly where you hoped, but you will be going somewhere. And for Broncos fans who I think have been watching this team simply tread water, doing nothing, just trying to stay afloat and failing even to do that, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it is. It kind of reminds me of Hard Knocks, with the Detroit Lions, where Dan Campbell said he used a Metallica lyric. He said,
that guy loves to mix some metaphors.
He said, sometimes you're looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes that light is a train.
It's a train.
Hopefully it's not a train here for the Broncos.
But at least you're going somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Well, you either want to be on the train, don't want to be under the train or hit by the train. So
right.
We'll see if that's the case.
Even if that's the worst case, you think about this. And let's say even if Bo Nix completely flames out, well, then the Broncos find out that they need a quarterback. You have to make that decision too. I don't think that's likely to happen. I don't think you do either. No. But either way, you have to know. You have to find out. And the only way to do it is commit. So the Broncos have done that as well. We'll talk about more of this, but I want to remind you, if you're self-employed and you're having trouble getting a home loan, obviously that can be tricky when you own the business and you run it yourself. You need to reach out to SCL Mortgage. SCL's helped thousands of self-employed people refinance their mortgage or buy a house with their bank statement loan and no tax returns needed. SCL understands all the specific challenges of being self-employed. So find them at myspecialmortgage.com or call 303-790-2222. That's 303-790-2222. SCL's been serving Colorado successfully for 23 years. So please call them today or visit them at myspecialmortgage.com if you're self-employed and you're looking to refinance or get your new home. NMLS number 1200716. We're here with Cody Roark of Mile High Sports, host of the Locked On Broncos podcast. And you went out there all training camp. You're out there for the practice yesterday. It is game week for the Broncos. Yeah. We know that Bo Nix is going to get all the snaps. He's QB1. We get that. But what other players, both new and veteran, are in line to get some significant snaps? And we'll start with the most obvious one. That would be free agent addition, Josh Reynolds.
Yeah, look, I think Josh Reynolds, with the release of Tim Patrick, Reynolds has now firmly moved into that wide receiver 2 role. And look, I think going back to day one of OTAs when I was there, I started thinking to myself, oh, the Nix to Josh Reynolds connection could be something fun to watch this season. There was one play, and this is the thing I like about it. And we heard from Josh Reynolds yesterday in a Zoom call where he talked about Bo and said, out of all the quarterbacks I played with, he has probably the most beautiful arm in terms of his touch, his accuracy. And what I mean by that is there was a specific throw there at the very beginning of OTAs where Bo Nix throws a high into the outside. And look, the defensive back, I think it was Levi Wallace, had great coverage, was on Josh Reynolds' hip, but it was to a point where only Josh Reynolds could get it and get 2 feet in bounds, where the DB, unless he was going to hold or PI, there's no way he could have impacted that play. So I like that. We saw that connection develop a little bit through training camp. You saw it in the Indianapolis Colts game there. I would say that maybe the one thing is that maybe Josh Reynolds wants that one over-the-shoulder goal line fade back where he kind of just went through his arms. Beautiful throw by Bo, by the way, on that one. But that's going to be a connection I think you're going to see a lot of, because I think regardless of how it is, teams are going to allocate their coverage resources to number 14, Cortland Sutton, coming off a 10-touchdown year. And the thing, it does make sense. Cortland's got the size, the athleticism. Josh Reynolds is going to be the guy that's going to see a lot of those other, attentions and in terms of coverage snaps. That's where it's like Denver's offensive production. And I made that point on Lockdown Broncos here today, where we're talking about it. Last year with Russell Wilson as the quarterback, his primary guy was Cortland Sutton. He tried to target Jerry Jeudy on some throws. They didn't have a successful connection or overall production from that standpoint. But Denver was almost dead last in passing first downs last season, even though Russ had a 28 to 6 touchdown interception ratio. That right there, like it kind of skewed things like, oh, well, Russell Wilson had a great year when you look at the stats. From a passing standpoint, in terms of production and efficiency, they didn't. In terms of, hey, you're not moving the ball on first down. Like Russ had a lot of completions to tailbacks out of the backfield. Samaje Perine, very big proponent.
No longer on the team. On the Chiefs, as a matter of fact.
He's on Kansas City.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll see how that one could be. I mean, I don't know. He's got some intel on Denver's offense that's probably going to help Kansas City, so that's not good.
They haven't needed it of late, but
I will say this though. Yeah, I will say this though. When you look at where that production came from, Denver didn't have really any production from the tight ends because Greg Dulcich was hurt. Mm-hmm. Broncos have seemingly put a plan in place. They even had Donald Parham Jr., who was on the Los Angeles Chargers for training camp. Big body guy. I don't think he'll be active for the first couple of weeks of the season, but I think he'll eventually be elevated.
I agree.
6'8", ridiculous size. He'll be, I think, a weapon here for a guy like Bo Nix. But then Marvin Mims, Devon Vele, the rookie wide receiver who's turned heads. There is pressure on this wide receiving core because of the release of Tim Patrick, who was healthy. And you can make the argument like Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Josh Reynolds. That's a good 1-2-3, especially for a young guy like Bo, because they parted ways with Tim, who's now with the Lions. It's like, all right, hey, Cortland's going to see the attention. Josh Reynolds will have to step up. And you're going to have Marvin Mims take a step forward. Devon Vele, I think, is going to play right away. I think he's going to have an instant impact. Probably not going to see Troy Franklin active on game days, though, to start the season. And
let's go to that, because Reynolds, by the way, 600 yards, 608 to be specific, and 5 touchdowns last year, opposite Amon-Ra St. Brown.
He was like the fourth or fifth option.
So there's some upside there. We've seen him as a secondary, tertiary, and beyond option with the Rams prior to the Lions. And maybe there's an opportunity for growth here for Reynolds now in his 8th season. But you talk about Vele. So let's go to him. The 7th rounder out of Utah, a guy that didn't have overwhelming stats that jumped off the chart last year. Not even 600 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Quarterback
with the Utes. Yeah, quarterback issues there. But you talked a bit about Parham. And we talk about Vele, and we're seeing the same thing. The Broncos may have, we'll find out, of course, after rosters get finalized and after week 1. The Broncos might have on average, and that includes Marvin Mims, who's shorter than you and me, but they might have the tallest receiving group in football. And you add a guy like Parham, even though he's a tight end, that does seem to be, if the idea isn't get a bunch of veteran guys to help out Bo Nix, it's maybe get a whole bunch of really big guys with good hands so that you have a better chance of pulling down those 50-50 balls.
Yeah, and look, Sean has raved about it all offseason long. He values size at the receiver position. And when you factor in little Jordan Humphrey being on the practice squad as well,
6'4",
he's also another tall guy. Lucas Kroll is 6'6". Mm-hmm. I mean, Greg Dulcich, I think 6'3". I mean, you have size across the board, which I think in today's NFL, you're seeing now more often. It's common. The prototype for cornerback now, it is 6'2", 6'3" type
it's
players.
It's getting taller, guys.
It is getting taller, except in the slot, which, primarily so. But I just remember the days where you could have like a 6', 6'1" corner.
But now you redraft a couple years ago, and I remember really kind of standing on the table for this guy, but I thought a couple of years ago Tariq Woolen was one of the players the Broncos absolutely should have
talented
picked.
Player.
And the idea, of course, he's 6'4", he can't stick a cornerback. Well, it turns out he actually can stick a cornerback, and he's really quite good. But you're right, the dynamics seem to change as guys get bigger and faster, and you're needing it may be that even though speed is as important as it ever was, technique, Pat Surtain's type of skill, may be more important than raw speed, because you are dealing with 6'4", 6'5" receivers now all the time. It's less about the burner straight down the field and more about running routes. We're running into a world where Puka Nacua, right, ends up having the great year he had, in part because the Rams prioritized GPS tracking of his routes rather than prioritizing his combine speeds to try to find the efficiency there. That's what's becoming the difference maker. And a guy like Bo Nix is accustomed to that.
Yeah. And look, I think so much emphasis is placed on testing in the combine. Like I think in certain areas, you have to test well in terms of that. But in the NFL, when you look at it, it's what is your speed? What is your ability to bend a corner, right? Especially as
you have to hit the athletic floor.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you kind of know that you can't play in the league.
40-yard dashes. I mean, it's great if you have straight line, but the reality is you're never going to be in a situation where you're really going to be straight line for, full speed. Like it's rare.
I had Carl Mecklenburg on the show a few years ago, and Mecklenburg, of course, famously drafted very, very late, and a borderline Hall of Famer, would be a Hall of Famer if he played for the Bears or the Jets or something like that. But he was asked specifically about that, and he timed it very poorly and pointed out, like, if I ever ran 40 yards in a straight line, it was because things already went really, really wrong, and I'm chasing a guy I was never going to get anyway. And that's just the nature of the game, is that especially on defense, you're not running 40 yards in a straight line ever.
What is your ability to move laterally quickly?
Yes.
I think that's probably the more
back to
important
speed.
metric. Yeah, your 3-cone drill, I think, is important. Your 10-yard split that you have there, I think that's going to be important. But really, it's just like for defensive backs, like I posted my video report over on my social media feed from yesterday's practice. There's a clip in there. If you go back and you watch it, just watch Pat Surtain and his back pedal when he turns and opens up. Best footwork I think I've ever seen in a player in terms of just body composure, how he stays level in terms of where he's at, in terms of turning his body. Unbelievable. But you need technicians, but you also need smart players. And look, you have to, in some cases, you have to have speed, because this game is going to dictate, like, hey, sometimes you're going to have to play press against one of the fastest guys in the NFL. But I think that Denver's in a position now where they have guys that fit the prototypes of Sean Payton's roster build. Like, Sean has been very on top of, like, mentioning things like, we want players at a specific weight, like in certain positions. We want a certain prototype. There's a reason for it. And there are going to be anomalies in a sense of guys who may be like smaller in stature. I think Jaquan McMillan probably has the best overall athletic makeup inside the slot here for Denver. I mean, he's a guy that can do a little bit of everything.
Well, that's the case, because he wasn't at any point. We talk about all the people that we talked about in training camp. We never even discussed Jaquan McMillan, because he was so locked in as that starter. It was irrelevant. That is close. A starter, by the way, in today's NFL. You really
he's going to get paid.
You start 12 players. If you really want to say you're starting 11, take out one of the middle linebackers and count the slot cornerback, because that's the role. Well, let's cut to the other guy who stands a chance to get early touches in this offense. And for you fantasy football players looking for the cheapies at the end, the old touchdown vultures, let's take a peek at Audric Estime, the man who knocked in 18 touchdowns last year, 17 of them on the ground for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how this is going to play out in the regular season, because I think Javonte is going to have a terrific comeback season.
I do too. I feel very, very
really
good
feel
about
that about him. My question is okay, when you get into a goal line situation, is Javonte going to stay in?
Why beat him up?
Audric in there at that point.
Why bother beating him up? I think it's an argument to go with a heavier side.
So far, like in Javonte's career, have we seen Javonte have the success inside the goal line?
Quite frankly, no.
No, we haven't, right? And that's not a bad thing.
Even when completely healthy.
Yeah. So my guess would be, like, even don't be surprised if Denver, when they get in the goal line this year, I wouldn't be surprised if they come out in a 2-back set where you do have Javonte, you have Audric Estime.
Give me more 2-back.
You're going to have the fullback. You're going to have the Michael Burtons, the Nate Adkins kind of lining up in certain situations if Denver's under center. But I think Estime is going to be a guy where he can be that goal line guy. I will say this. We saw it in the Cardinals game of what he can be. I think in that Colts game that we saw, and I think a little bit in that Packers game, we didn't necessarily see Audric thrive in that situation, right? Maybe it's his first NFL game.
Well, remember, he had dealt with a nagging injury that kept him out of OTAs.
For him to come back from that knee injury that he had, the scope and surgery, and to come back and look how he has in training camp, I was impressed by that, and certainly seeing it in the games, it's impressive. I think ball security is going to be the biggest emphasis here for Sean Payton. Estime did have the one where he coughed it up against the Colts and got returned for a touchdown. Sean, I think from that point forward, I know I've seen him in practice. He's really emphasized the ball security. They've been working a lot of running back drills where, hey, it is protecting the football, and it's making sure, like, you're having guys come and try to rip the ball out.
What are those like? Because, I remember back in high school, right? You could tell. So somebody had to carry a bag of flour from class to class. You had a bag of flour under your arm, and you had to carry books in one hand and a bag of flour. And anybody on the football team, not any random student, but anyone on the football team who walked by, try to bat that out of your hand. You do the same thing in the pros?
Well,
is he walking around with the football
no.
waiting for guys to just knock it out when he's on his way to the men's room?
I don't think it's
something.
I don't think it's that case too. And he's got big arms. Like that might be an issue itself. It's like, but if you can somehow tuck the nose of the football in between your pectoral muscle and obviously your biceps and corral it in, I think it's going to be hard for anyone to rip that ball out from him. I mean, I used to coach running backs too. When I first started my coaching career, and the first thing that we always did, I would have my players at school, they'd carry a football around. Right. And I would say to other players, you see them around, go try to knock it out. And obviously, I mean, that would cause issues. Teachers wouldn't like that. I'm like, there's a method to the madness. Don't interrupt the process there. But I think these guys, they understand the importance of ball security and maintaining that. But the biggest thing I think we're going to see with Estime is he's going to contribute, I think, more out of the backfield as a receiver than most people think. I think that'll be an underrated aspect of his game. And look, we get to see that this week. Look, that's a tough defensive line. You got Leonard Williams, you got Jonathan Hankins, you got former Bronco Draymond Jones. You have talented linebackers there that are also going to be plugging and filling the gaps. And then, I think that's going to be the question is how do the Broncos come out and establish their identity here in Sunday's game? I think a lot of it's going to start with pounding the rock because then that takes a little bit of pressure off of Bo Nix. So that should be the emphasis here on Sunday.
That's got to be better. Obviously, the Broncos were not a top team in rushing when it came to touchdowns, when it came to yards per carry. These things all have to be notably better if they're going to accomplish what they're going to want to accomplish and everything we're talking about. First, you have to get down to the goal line to begin with, but it was worth pointing out Michael Burton on the practice squad for the Broncos right now. So perhaps the two-back set that Cody is talking about, Bronco fans haven't seen that. Think of the old Broncos fans that think back to John Keyworth and Rob Lytle have got to be pretty excited about that as well. Want to remind you before we go back around a little bit of the AFC West and some of the NFL that you catch him every Wednesday here on Wellness Wednesdays. Dr. Rick Perea does a terrific job as a performance psychologist. He's worked with basically so many sports teams, so many more than I can even mention. He's worked with the Broncos during their Super Bowl season, the Rockies during their playoff runs. Those actually happened, by the way. He's also worked with the Nuggets as they've come to grow along, and the Dolphins, the Bears, lots of NFL teams. But more than that, he's also worked with businesses. He's worked with the Denver Fire Department. He's worked with local businesses in order to help you get your head in the right place. No matter what you do, you can do it more efficiently and more effectively when your mind is set right. And that's why he hosts Wellness Wednesdays right here on Mile High Sports. But you can also see what he can do for you. Check out the website, think1foryou.com. That's think1, the number 4u.com. You can check out Dr. Rick Perea every Wednesday and see what he can do for high school athletics talents, for anyone from working at that level, trying to get into college sports, or you can actually be a CEO of a business and still find a way to improve yourself with your head in the right spot. So get your checkup from your neck up from Dr. Rick Perea every Wednesday at Wellness Wednesday and see what he can do for you. Go to think1foryou.org or .com, either one. See, then you don't mess it up that way. And that's helpful for me because I just put it all in there. But yeah, he's got it set up. So check out Dr. Rick Perea. Wrote a really interesting book as well. Interesting fellow. Make sure you check him out tomorrow on Wellness Wednesdays. We take a look around the league and we will start, of course, with I still think it's weird. Cody. We'll start with Russell Wilson because in the latest Mile High Sports magazine, you see it up above our heads here, two different covers. We have Deion Sanders and Bo Nix. And at the very end, our pal Norm, who gets a little sarcastic at the end of it, talked about Russell Wilson getting his revenge when he came in with Pittsburgh. Russell Wilson already got his revenge, okay? He went from a team that didn't make the playoffs to a team that did make the playoffs, and the Broncos are paying him nearly $40 million to do it. But Wilson named not only the captain for the Steelers offensively, but the only one. Is that a statement that Wilson has come in and changed the culture of the Steelers, or is that they're trying to make fetch happen in Pittsburgh?
He was named the only captain of the team?
He was named the only offensive captain of the Steelers.
The only offensive captain. I was going to say, if he was named the only captain, I'd be like, wait, what happened to TJ Watt?
The only offensive captain, trying a little too hard to make this work, to hold off Justin Fields. There was even talk late in training camp that Fields might be the kickoff and punt returner.
I even saw some talk, my guy, Chris Carter, who covers the team daily in person for the Post-Gazette over there. I mean, he's even said he felt like Justin Fields won the job. And I think a lot of people felt like Justin Fields won the job, but Russ came out and they won it. Part of me is wondering, how long is that going to last? You know, because there are things about Russ's game that, that
are in decline
used to work. Yeah. I think, I forget who I was having a conversation with yesterday, but talking about we somehow brought up Andrew Luck, right? And say Andrew Luck, thankfully for him, knew hey, I know I need to step away from the game. at what point does Russ get to that point for where he's at? I still think he can play a couple more years. I'm not saying he can't play right now, but I'm saying the way he plays, I don't know if it's conducive to how the Steelers want to play offensively, especially considering they got injuries right now on their offensive line with Sayamalo, the guard who played. I mean, I watched him. He was a senior my year when I graduated as well. He played for Corvallis High School. Luckily we never played that team. They would have steamrolled us.
After his rookie year, Najee Harris does not look the same.
Yeah,
maybe too many carries.
Offensive line's a little different. You know, I think Pickens is going to be a great addition for them. Obviously, they picked up former Bronco Brandon Johnson. I think he'll be a guy that contributes for them. But
second on the Broncos in touchdown receptions.
The strength of that Steelers team is their defense, and I mean it's kind of similar. Like not last year. Like the strength of Denver's team was not the defense last year. At one stretch, it was when they went on that 5-game win streak, but. Is Russ's play style sustainable for what Pittsburgh wants to accomplish? And look, the Broncos are going to see Russ early on week 2. Right. It's going to be the home opener. That's going to be loud. I imagine Broncos fans are going to be counting down the play clock every time they're on an offense. And I also think it's going to be very, very loud. I'm very curious to see how that's going to play out in Pittsburgh. That's a tough division. And I don't know. Like, I was talking to Dan Mormon. I think that there's a scenario where neither Russ or Justin Fields by week 13, 14 will be the starter for Pittsburgh. I think there'll be somebody else.
The thing that interests me about that, besides obviously Wilson's status, and I have no beef with Russell Wilson.
Russ is great, dude. Love Russ. Russ was so good to me.
I get that he's kind of his own man. Yeah. I get that. And I quite frankly don't think even Broncos fans really have any reason to really dislike him. I think there was an effort there. I think Payton and Wilson were never going to schematically fit. And so, you know, they ended up parting ways, and it worked out well for Wilson. And assuming Bo Nix is what Sean Payton wants, it's going to work out well for Broncos and Broncos fans. So, you know, it is what it is. But Wilson and Fields have the same problem. They both hold on to the ball as long as any quarterbacks in the league. And in a game where this gets more decisive and quicker, that's a real problem. Not only because of the fact that it's harder and harder to get those big kill shots down the sideline, which Russell Wilson has lived off of, to either Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf over the course of his Golden Tate over the course of his career. Baldwin, right? Yeah. They hold on, wait, go down the sideline and get a deep play. But those aren't happening in the NFL with any frequency anymore. It's about using those quick releases. Even Patrick Mahomes continues to go down and down and down in not only time before release, but depth of target.
Yeah.
So both Wilson as an aging veteran and Fields as a relatively young guy are kind of playing a game that is being taken out of the NFL. And so for the Steelers, the gamble here is I don't know if it matters who starts, because one's just a younger version of kind of the same guy.
Yeah, and look, that storyline is going to play itself out, I think, here early on. And I imagine when things get rough with that offense, they struggle, they go 3 and out, you know, for 2 consecutive drives. If that's the case, you're going to see a lot of unrest in that fan base over there about it. And I think a lot of the fan base there is already kind of like, I'm not sure about the quarterback situation. I think a large preference of Steelers fans that I have seen at least would clamor for Justin Fields.
Younger players.
But like, you know, and you look at Justin, like Justin is still moldable at this point. Like Justin hasn't been the guy that obviously the Chicago Bears drafted, and the passing element is kind of up and down with him. But I still think you can get something good out of Justin Fields. And I think you can put him in a certain situation or a certain offense where he can have success. I don't know, like, why are you wasting the timeline here with Russ, who's older and may only be here in the NFL for maybe another year?
Well, both of these guys are unrestricted free agents after the year. So I'm inclined with you. That's interesting, because if you're everything. Pittsburgh, you think that you were a playoff team last year with Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph. So you're thinking you can get there again. But if you can't, and you're not as close to the Super Bowl as you think, then why not go with the younger guy? That said, maybe the answer is neither of these guys. And Pittsburgh is looking to improve the position in the offseason because they have literally none. They're 3 quarterbacks. Nobody is under contract for 2025. So the Steelers have it all up in the air. That will be interesting. Going over to the AFC West, let's take a quick peek at them, because obviously we know it's the Chiefs and everybody else. And there's no reason to expect anything different. Even if you want to change the names here and there on the Chiefs, it's still the Chiefs. It's still Mahomes. It's still Kelsey. It's still Chris Jones, who now I think with Aaron Donald retired becomes the most disruptive interior force in defense
also
in football. So he should be, right? But we know we got the Chiefs. But I'm curious. The Chargers are trying to rebuild on the fly. Their wide receiver positions is basically, I don't know, Joshua Palmer and Ladd McConkey. Okay.
Quentin Johnston,
Right.
who you're hoping.
Their running back situation is they basically grabbed the guys that couldn't get it done for the Ravens and just grabbed them both in Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. So they're rebuilding on the fly. Justin Herbert is dealing with plantar fasciitis. He's had injuries the last couple of years. This is Jim Harbaugh's team. I think a lot of people expect a quick turnaround. But as the preseason rolled along, I'm not sure it's going to be that quick.
I think the Chargers will be competitive this season. I think the biggest mystery is how does that plantar fascia injury to Justin Herbert impact what they do? Like from that standpoint, like
especially
looking at
if they
the guys,
can't run the ball.
100%. Well, and I think that's going to be their thing is to be able to run the ball.
They want to.
Because I look at what Justin Herbert's done and look, Justin Herbert for some reason gets a lot of criticism. Well, he's never done anything. I think Justin Herbert has done more with less around him than any quarterback in the NFL in the last 3 or 4 years. I think he's obviously taken drastic steps. I think Brandon Staley, terrible coach to be able to pair him with, and Justin still did some things that were relatively exciting there. You get rid of Mike Williams, get rid of Keenan Allen. You have an entirely new looking team. You mentioned the Ladd McConkeys, who Ladd obviously is, I think from what I've read and from what I've heard, has had a tremendous offseason. He's going to be a guy that's going to be used quite a bit inside the slot. Joshua Palmer, who really had started coming on a little bit there for them last season. And then Quentin Johnston, who you're hoping can overcome the drop issues that have kind of plagued the early start of his career, obviously coming out of Texas Christian. But you look at it, it's like, okay, now you got J.K. Dobbins, you got Gus Edwards, you got rid of Austin Eckler here. So you're going to run the football more, and you're doing it with guys that have, pretty extensive injury history. Knowing Harbaugh and the way that he operated that Michigan team, my belief here, especially with Justin Herbert's plantar fascia injury, this is going to be a team that is going to primarily run the football this year. And I think you're going to see volume where you're going to get 35 carries a game between two backs.
But I don't think like we thought last year coming into this time at this time of the year that the Chargers are maybe a dark horse contender in the AFC. I don't think that happens this year.
No,
we know the Raiders are not. The Raiders, of course, with their quarterbacking situation, Gardner Minshew, like we talked earlier about when Nate Lundy was here, and he'll be back in a bit. You talk about entertainment. At least you get entertainment with Gardner Minshew. But no one expects the Raiders to be all that good. That said, that's kind of what the expectations were last year. And even though they weren't all that good, they kind of surprised. Now with a full year under his belt with Antonio Pierce, is there a possibility that everyone is overlooking the Raiders so much that they might sneak up on somebody?
I think it's possible. I mean, the way that team plays for Pierce, and
play hard.
They lobbied, and I'll say everything starts.
The players lobbied for that coach, and that included Devontae Adams, who definitely would like to be out of there, but even he lobbied for Pierce as well.
The receiver documentary certainly shed some insight in there, but I think everything for that team in terms of who they wanted, who they lobbied for, everything starts and ends with Max Crosby. Yes. Max Crosby is the bona fide true voice of that team. Everyone's wondering what's going to happen with Devontae Adams. And look, I think that their receiving core, they've got talent there. Zamir White ran for over 100-something yards against the Broncos in the season finale last year. Defensively, they are a little more stout. And Max Crosby is a true disruptor, and we've seen that. We've seen that specifically against Denver. So for me, I can't sit here and as much as I cover the Broncos. I know Broncos fans are watching this. They're like, "Oh, we don't want to say anything good about the Raiders." I think the Raiders will be pretty competitive.
I actually think they're going in the right direction.
They just finished tied last year,
right? And the Raiders won it on the tiebreaker. So I think the Raiders are actually in many ways doing what the Broncos are doing, in the fact they have chosen a direction and they're going that way. The difference is the Broncos know what their quarterback is, and the Raiders don't. Yeah. But the Raiders will probably get one next year. And all of a sudden, let's say they end up with
Quinn Ewers,
hypothetically Ewers, Shadur Sanders. Then we know what direction they're going in.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I think there's some danger there. But for the Broncos this year, when you look at hopping over the Chiefs, that's unrealistic. You're hoping for the very best, and you've said the Broncos will win as many as 10. First. But you'd see if you can be competitive for a wild card.
Yeah.
And that means 10 wins. And I know you thought the Broncos can get there. Can they get there without a win on Sunday?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, the best part about it is it's early in the season, right? Week 1.
But those wins and losses
17,
count the same.
They certainly do, but there's room for adjustment. I mean, Denver started off 1-5 last year,
right?
And then they
can't do that. Obviously,
they finished the year 7-4 from the onset.
And this year, the easy part of the schedule is in the first 8 games, it flips.
And I would say this too, like perception of the schedule. This, people always try to ask me what my predictions are. I'm like, I hate doing predictions. Like, if you ever have me on a show, please don't ask me to predict the game because I hate that. It's literally my least favorite practice in sports media.
Don't ask
you never ask me that. That's what I appreciate about you. But I'll say this, like looking at the schedule, everyone bases it off of, how those teams did last year. We see it all the time. Teams that were terrible bottom of the barrel suddenly turn
a third of the roster on average on every NFL team turns over. A third.
Quick.
I mean, so things turn around quickly, and that's part of the reason I think Broncos fans are so frustrated in the way this has gone for the last few years, because with good management, because of the nature of the salary cap and non-guaranteed contracts, teams can go from being bad to very good in a short span of time. On average, every single year, 6 new teams make the playoffs that did not make it the year before. Over the last 5 years, the average is 6 new teams. The Broncos would like to be one of those. He's Cody Roark. Make sure you catch him every morning on the Locked On Broncos podcast. Follow him, of course, on social media, Cody Roark NFL, and you'll be able to catch him here on Tuesdays as well, as he'll sit in studio, and we'll get to knock around things with the Broncos as the season goes along. Cody, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Well, also some other stuff coming up too. If you're a Broncos fan, you love film reviews. Every Tuesday, we'll do film reviews on Broncos quarterback Bo Nix, things that he did well, things maybe he can improve on. Wednesdays, you'll get a film review on a defensive player that stood out or a defensive series, so you can get that exclusively on MHS's YouTube. Plus, we also have written stuff every single day. We're talking quantity and volume over there at milehighsports.com. Check it out.
It will be fresh, and it will be hot, and it will be Broncos. We'll get back to more of that in a moment with Nate Lundy as Cody and Nate switch up. But I want to remind you, for the last 4 years, you've heard all the ads, seen all the ads, overwhelmed by all the ads for sports betting. I get it. Some of them you can probably even recite in your sleep. So we're going to add one more to the pile, but this one is actually going to be worth it. It's going to make the rest of those a lot easier. Mile High Sports has gathered all of the best sign-up bonuses and offers, and we put them on one single page on our website because we wanted to make it easy for folks interested in betting to find the best options. So we researched them all, brought them all together in a way that makes it simple to know what's available, whether it's bonus bets, second chance bets, deposit matches. All of it's in one place because the way you want to get into sports betting is different than somebody else. Not every promotion is as good for you as it might be for somebody else. So you need to find a way to sort that out and figure out how you want to jump into that world in the way that you think is best for you. So that makes it easy. Easy to find. Just go to milehighsports.com today or download our mobile app and then click on Colorado Sports Betting. Right? Obvious and easy. It's just that simple. You'll get all of the best options available for you. Think of it as your bonus from your friends right here at Mile High Sports. Nate Lundy is back in the house here. Yep. Because as you pointed out before, with Cody sitting over there, Nate was sitting over there. Not at you. Nate wasn't sitting with you. Obviously, you would notice that. Before I'm sitting, he's over there behind Danny Bailey.
Have I kind of got a little bit of a Mike Shanahan thing going on with my tanned head
Just
here?
A bit.
Just a little bit. Like I'm looking at the camera right now. I'm like, I don't know. It might be a little. Kind of looks like I spray painted myself.
Yeah. There
that's better.
Yeah, I got a little lighter.
Oh, look at the lighting there.
Yeah, that one's even more friendly.
That's spectacular right there.
Now you look pasty like me.
That's some high quality television lighting, is what that is. That's beautiful. You were just talking, Sean, about the different sign up bonuses and the stuff that's on. If you're interested, folks, go check out the preseason, the pre-NFL deal that Fanatics is doing right now. It's on our site. You'll find it on the site. Just like Sean said, go to milehighsports.com, click on the Colorado online sports betting. Fanatics has a phenomenal offer right now. I'm just throwing that out there really quick. Just trust me, go check it out. It's pretty cool. One of the best ones right now in terms of the preseason. So just throwing that out there in case you're looking for a little bonus.
Well, since we're on that, Nate, and I'll throw Danny Bailey for a little bit of a loop there, but I do want to look at the Broncos.
Throwing Danny for a loop. It's fun.
Well, not for Danny, but
no, if you're not careful, Danny will start throwing stuff.
Yeah. You'll notice.
Like a keyboard across the room.
Make for good television.
Yes, it does.
But the Broncos' season win total last year was 8, tied for second in the AFC West with the Raiders. So they were behind the Raiders, as Cody and I just discussed. This year, the over-under is 5.5. That's bad. That's considered very, very low. As a matter of fact, the Broncos, their odds to win the Super Bowl are plus 15,000, meaning that all that's based on 100. If you were to bet $100, you'd win $15,000 if the Broncos were to win the Super Bowl. That's tied for the 27th worst in the league. Only 3 teams actually have longer odds to win the Super Bowl. So the folks in Vegas don't think very highly about the Broncos and think that they'll not even get to 6 wins. You're one of them as well.
Correct. Yeah,
I've got them for 5 up with the schedule because obviously the Broncos this year have more road games than home games. Here's a bit of a bad break.
Here's what I pointed out to somebody, and I mentioned it in the roundtable that we did at milehighsports.com this past Friday. I said this at the beginning of the show. You want to go a little bit of orange and blue, sunshine and roses, okay? Figure out a way to go 4-4 at home. Play 500 football at home.
Well,
okay,
a bare minimum. Right?
Okay. Can you find 2 wins on the road? Because I can't. Can't find it. Can't find it on the schedule. I don't know where there's 2 wins on the road.
It is.
And that would be how you would have to get to 6. And so that's why I'm playing the under. Just the way that the schedule aligns, I think that's the way that you have to go. Folks, there are 17 regular season games, correct? Am I right, Sean?
That's right.
Got the math. Okay.
Up until they
17 regular season games.
Soon.
Do you know how many the Broncos are favored as of the opening line? 2. It's the home game against the Raiders. They're favored by 1. And the home game against the Panthers, they're favored by 2.5. So not only do I think there are dogs in every game, and it doesn't mean you don't pull off an upset as a dog. Folks, of the 8 home games as of right now, as of how the lines opened for the NFL season, they are only favored at home in 2 of those. And you and I, even as a novice, fans or sports bettors, would have been able to say, yeah, those are probably the 2. Home against the Raiders, and it's only a point, which is basically a pick 'em, y'all. And 2.5 with the Panthers. That's it.
The Panthers,
every other game on the schedule, they are a dog. And in some cases, they are a dog by more than a touchdown.
The home schedule, you talk about the Steelers, then the Raiders, as you pointed out, the Chargers, the Panthers, that Panthers game, Atlanta, which is expected to be quite a bit better, obviously, after signing Kirk Cousins, the Browns, and the Colts, and then you finish with the Chiefs.
And then the Chiefs in week 18.
So that's obviously going to be the Chiefs will maybe give you a window because they may have locked up everything by then.
So going back to your point, though, right? We're talking about an over-under of 5.5. That is what we're looking at right now for this team, is an over-under of 5.5. And so what I tried to be able to do is say, hey, look, first of all,
4-4 at home.
9 of them are on the road. Okay, this is the odd year. 9 of them are on the road. So that already works against you. And can you be 500 at home? Right now, regardless of what happens on the road, as a season ticket holder, I could tell you right now, if this team went 4-4 at home, I'd be ecstatic. I'd be buying rounds of beer for everybody in my row. Okay. Because that would be so nice after what we've gone through. Like, thank goodness they pulled off that win last year against Kansas City, because that actually was like, there was this one little bright moment that happened. Oh, I'm so happy. That's what happened to me at that game. Like by the 4th quarter, I was like, this is so great. This is the greatest game of all time.
You don't have to win games because Jimmy Garoppolo steps out of the back of the end zone anymore, things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I try not, like, I actually respect what Cody just said with you a minute ago about the idea of not going game by game and what's going to happen in every single game and all of that.
Injuries
okay. I don't have a problem with that. But there's a reason that the odds makers are doing what they're doing. There's a reason that the Broncos are only favored in 2 games as of right now. There is a reason that the win total is set to 5.5. Just right now, that's just how this aligns. And I'm okay with that.
I'm starting to warm up to the idea that they can get to 6.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid.
I think I'm starting to warm up to the idea they can get 6. And here's why. I don't think this Seattle game is an automatic loss. I don't think the Seahawks are going to be world beaters. And I think there's a lot of things for them in a first game too, including a first head coaching game for Mike McDonald. We saw what happened with Nathaniel Hackett in his first head coaching game in Seattle. So, things happen. I don't think Pittsburgh, we went over that with Cody, is going to be the kind of team they've been in recent years. Underestimating Pittsburgh, however, is a pretty good cottage industry for people, because that every year Mike Tomlin gets them to playoffs and wins. But I don't think Tampa Bay is as good as they looked by the tail end of last year.
But you're on the road.
Got hot, but you are on the road. I don't think the Jets are going to be as good as people believe. That 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers is going to step back in.
Yeah, but that Jets
and turn them
defense
into
is
an
good.
expert. Jets defense is good. We talk about the Raiders. We don't know about the Chargers. I don't think the Saints are that good. We know the Panthers are terrible. That said, it's going to all be decided in the first half of the season, because after that, once it hits November, Baltimore, KC, Atlanta, you get the Raiders, but Cleveland, Indy, probably would have made the playoffs if Richardson doesn't get hurt. The Chargers, Cincinnati, and Kansas City. That's a really good schedule if you're looking to bet against the Denver Broncos. So if they don't get it going in the early going, they're probably not going to get to 6. And maybe with a rookie at quarterback, that's the assumption. You're right. I think it's about an 80% chance they don't get to 6, which isn't the worst thing for the Broncos, bettors aside, because for the Broncos, who still have picks they need to make up with after the Sean Payton and Russell Wilson trades, this is an opportunity to get some higher picks and make some decisions. Even if Bo Nix shows that he can be the guy going forward, they're still going to need more help. Maybe you go out there and draft a tackle. Garrett Bowles is a free agent after this season. You may need to go get the best tackle in the country. If you don't need to go get the quarterback, you have an opportunity to do that. So in the end, it's not a bad thing for the Broncos either way. The idea for Broncos fans, I think, Nate, is they have to get used to the idea of a rebuild and the fact that 8 and 9 was a little bit of an anomaly, and they're going to backslide in the wins and losses. That said, I already look at this roster, and I have fewer questions and fewer concerns about what this team's plan is and how they can accomplish it than I did last year. Even though that team finished with 8 wins, this team could finish with 5 or 6. And I would probably still say it's a better season than the 8-win campaign of 2023 because there's actually something behind it. There is a direction and there is a plan. There wasn't a plan in 2023. We traded for Russell Wilson. We have Sean Payton. Let's just see how it all works out. Now there's a plan. For Broncos fans, the idea of a backslide has to become comfortable. And as you pointed it out, Nate, perhaps being entertaining needs to be the objective for the Broncos and for Broncos fans this season. At least enjoy what you're watching and realize the future may be getting brighter.
Correct. And that's why I say 5 wins. I stand by that. I think they're going to win 5. I think that's the number. And so if it sits at over under at 5.5, I'm betting the under. I think that's going to be the case. Having another high draft pick is not a bad thing.
No. Not when you're a rebuilding team. It's not.
When you recognize where you're at, it is not a bad thing. Do you wind up going out and getting a corner that you can put opposite Pat Surtain?
Sure.
Maybe. Give yourself a nice little dynamic
duo. If you're
duo.
picking in the top 10, you should be able to get at least somebody you can start for you.
You might be able to do something like that. You might be able to give yourself a dynamic duo in that secondary. And give somebody to line up opposite Pat Surtain, which I think ultimately this team is going to need because as you and I talked about, Sean, when we were at training camp, one of the things that is desperately needed is the ability to provide pressure in the secondary so that teams cannot just simply go away from Surtain. You have got to make sure that they are forced into potentially some difficult quarterback play, especially in the AFC West. Because I do believe that by this time next year, we're talking about a different starting quarterback for the Raiders and likely one that they will have drafted. And so, whether that is Carson Beck out of Georgia, isn't that his name?
Yep.
Did I get it right?
Yep.
Okay. Whether it's Carson Beck, but do you take those 5 wins and you put yourself with a top 7 pick? If you're the Broncos and you're looking at somebody to go opposite Pat Surtain, if there is a cornerback that just absolutely lights it up, do you go take, I think right now the consensus in terms of the best offensive tackle is Will Campbell from LSU. Is that your answer? I don't know. That's not my job. I'm not an NFL scout. That's not what I do. And I certainly don't pretend to be one, especially on the radio. But I think that what is necessary is to say it's okay when you see the flashes, because here's the other thing. If you start to see the right notch up at quarterback and the right notch at this position and at that position, the other thing that allows you to do is start to focus and get away from a shotgun blast in the draft,
right?
Where you're just trying to find all kinds of stuff and be able to say, we need this, we need this, and we need this. And you're able to attach yourself to the draft, and you're not doing, again, this, blast of shotgun pellets where you're aiming at everything. You're actually able to focus in like a dart, and you're saying, we need that, and we need that. And I think that's going to help this team immensely, not even to talk about 9 figures worth of cap space right now. As it stands right now. Yeah. 9 figures worth of cap space. So not only can you focus in on what you're going to do in the draft, you can focus in on what you want to do in free agency. And if Bo is good, right, and you get some defensive guys that want to come play with the best corner in the league, Now, all of a sudden, maybe you become a little bit more attractive to those free agents. That's exactly what happened when Peyton Manning was here, and you have a chance for that to redeem itself and repeat itself.
And it's exactly what happened to the New Orleans Saints when Drew Brees and Sean Payton were at their peak as well. And obviously, that's kind of what Peyton is trying to bring to Denver. And the point you make is good, especially about the draft. And I know we're getting way ahead with the draft, but remember, what Nate just said is how teams actually draft. You'll always hear the line, oh, we just draft the best available player regardless of position. Here's the trick. Nobody actually does that until about the 7th round. You actually are drafting positions of need. Kansas City Chiefs are not going to take their first round pick and draft a quarterback if anyone fell to them, right? That makes no sense. Teams don't do that. So you're right. And you look at the top offensive lineman in the last 2 years, the first offensive lineman went off the board 5th this year in Joe Alt, 6th the year before. The top cornerback in the league went off 16th 2 years ago, 21st this year. So when you look at those positions in particular, if the Broncos are picking in the top 10, they're going to have an opportunity to pick a very top player at either of those positions if that's where they want to go. And if Bo Nix proves to be, if not the guy, and remember, I understand for Broncos fans who have now witnessed, John Elway and Peyton Manning win Super Bowls for their franchise, even if Bo Nix is nowhere near those guys, and spoiler alert, he's not. If he's good enough to get you wins with Peyton in particular, much like I talked about Purdy in San Francisco, you'd obviously take that. Then you don't have to worry about the quarterback position, and now you're filling it, and then you can make a major leap. This kind of feels like the deep breath the Broncos are taking before they really push forward, hopefully as soon as next year.
And I think that's why this rebuild is so important, is because there is actually a plan. There is actually a path, and that's part of where that draft, that $100 million, all those things come into play.
And the year after that, the money frees up again. It's 2 huge years of hits, and this one's worse, but
and please note,
dead cap numbers.
One of the things that I didn't mention that is always possible is if you're sitting there with the 5th pick, if there's somebody that somebody's in love with, there's nothing stopping you from moving backwards and adding another one. So I didn't even go down that path. And obviously we all know that as football fans that's also
high draft
possible.
Picks are great.
It's absolutely possible. So you can always find ways to be able to maneuver things one way or the other as you start to prepare yourself for the draft. Folks, I know that summer is kind of winding down a little bit. I get it. I was, Sean was enjoying the Rockies game over the weekend. I was out camping and enjoying all of that. But one of the things that means is, of course, that football season is here. And I know a lot of you do like what my wife and I do. We do football watch parties. We invite everybody over. And it's absolutely impossible for me, my wife, or anybody, if you're doing this, this feeling, to be able to enjoy the game if you're stuck in the kitchen. So I want you to remember our friends at Rolling Smoke Barbecue and their 4 locations that they've got all over the Front Range, because you've got the opportunity to get everything catered for you so that you get a chance to enjoy the game. One of the beauties when you reach out to Rolling Smoke Barbecue is you can set up the day, the time that you're going to pick up. You determine exactly what you want, right? I need a couple pounds of this. I need a half a pound of this. I need a quart of this side, whatever it is. You decide what you want. Then you go, all right, here's where I'm going to pick it up. And here's what time I'm going to be able to pick it up. So you can do it, get it back to the house. You can set it up perfectly with the spread, and you're ready when your friends come over with some really, really good barbecue. I believe it's the best on the Front Range. And I told you they got 4 locations. You can find them at the original in the Stanley Marketplace in Aurora. You can then find the one that is down south in Centennial, not far from where Sean and I are sitting right now at the corner of Dry Creek and University, right across from Arapahoe High School. They're also in the Golden Mill, and the new location is up there on 38th in Wheat Ridge. You can also find them out at Red Rocks. If you're hitting up one of the late season shows, you'll find them up there at the top, and you can grab yourself a bite to eat before the show begins, before the opener comes on. So make sure you check them out there. RollingSmokeBBQ.com is the website. Go on there. The catering menus are on there, all the information you need, and then how you can get a hold of them and put that order in. So if it's time for a football watch party, it is time for Rolling Smoke Barbecue.
Well, we talk about this rebuild for the Denver Broncos, and then the question about it that probably makes the most sense is, even though the Broncos aren't saying it, they're doing it, and that's fine. You don't expect look, teams in every single sport are in the business of selling merch, tickets, and hope.
Beer.
Okay? And beer. Also that. But you're talking about, that's the nature of it. So yeah, they're not going to say they're rebuilding. I get it. But as we pointed out right off, when you move on from Justin Simmons, arguably your best player last year. Mm-hmm. You move on from Jerry Jeudy. You move on from Josie Jewell. You move on from a Tim Patrick. You're getting younger. You're rebuilding. That's the reality of what the Denver Broncos are doing. The question is, how does Sean Payton handle that? Here's a guy that has never at any point won fewer than 7 games in a season. And here we are arguing over whether they can get to 5 or 6. So neither of us think they're getting to 7. So Sean Payton's going to have to live with something he's never had to live with, and that would be a season in which you kind of don't have much of a shot at making the playoffs from the get-go. Have you seen enough from Payton over the course of this offseason in which he does seem lighter? He does seem like it's a little, he's happier. It's clearly because he found his quarterback that he believes in, and maybe even his backup in Zach Wilson, who seems to be a little fired up in being able to help that reclamation project going. Has Sean Payton mellowed out a little bit?
No, actually, I'm not convinced that he has. And that's because talk to me after they lose. And then show me that guy at the podium and tell me whether or not the same guy pops up that we saw several times last year that was extremely frustrated. And I don't blame him for being frustrated, by the way. Not at all. So I'm not so sure whether or not there has been this evolution of Sean Payton. What I actually believe is that Sean Payton has forced an evolution on this team. I believe it's actually the other way around. So you talked about moving on from Jerry Jeudy. I still disagree with the movement with Justin Simmons, but I understand the business that the NFL is. However, what he did was he forced this team and this roster to evolve to what he wanted. So I don't know necessarily that he has evolved per se, as that he has imposed his will. And that's what he should be doing as a head coach, is impose his will on what he wanted out of the roster, what he wanted out of practice, what he wants out of the organization as a whole. And that is what we are seeing, is an evolution that he has put upon the team as opposed to the other way around.
And that's an interesting way to put it, because you're right. This is unquestionably, and we talked about this during training,
which, by the way, makes him look like he evolved, by the way.
Right. And
it's just that he's changing the stuff around him as opposed to necessarily changing right here.
That's a really good point. And it's an interesting observation, because you're right in that regard. We talked about it in training camp. This Broncos roster, but the 91 guys who were in camp, including the one international prospect, 60 of them were guys that would have been brought in since Sean Payton was head coach. In the last 2 off seasons alone, 2/3 of this roster is now Sean Payton guys, quote unquote. Well, that's okay, because that's the guy he hired as coach. You're giving him a lot of money and a lot of power to do it. But the other part that is interesting, where he's going to have to evolve, Nate, is at the quarterback position. He likes Bo Nix. Everything was, made very clear that they liked Bo Nix from the beginning of the process. It's always been a good fit. But Sean Payton has literally had a rookie quarterback start for him in exactly 1 game ever. That would be Ian Book, the former Notre Dame quarterback, who started a game in which they lost in 2021.
Yep.
That's the only time a rookie quarterback has ever started a game for Sean Payton, a man who has coached 258 regular season NFL games. Now he's starting a rookie quarterback on day 1. He will have to evolve in the way he handles that.
Yeah, he absolutely does. And I think he's capable of doing that, by the way. I think that is just a matter of him applying what he believes and his offensive knowledge and his offensive philosophies into this new scenario. So I think that part of it, you can talk about him evolving. Like I said, I'm not buying that he's evolved with a personality quite yet, because I think he has a massive ego, and that's fine. There's a lot of people in professional sports that do. And I think that is what we're going to wind up seeing as we evolve ourselves, or as we progress ourselves through the season, is whether or not is that ego continue to be on full display, or is he comfortable right now? Is he in a much more comfortable place? Is he having his Phil Jackson Zen moment? Mm-hmm. And suddenly he's okay with how these things are progressing in the season?
Well, he had
I hope that's the case.
$20 million a year contract reportedly. It's not as clear like the players, but $20 million a year. We know that he is the man in charge of football. I get it. On the org chart, Sean Payton and George Payton are the same, but they're not. Sean Payton is in charge of football. However they want to lay it out, you can lay it out. But maybe there is some of that. Maybe there is the understanding that you can't win the Super Bowl every year. And Sean Payton, who will turn 61 during this season, understands that at this point. It's been a while since he won his Super Bowl. And the idea that, but I'm getting to make the team I want the way I want. And maybe that's enough for him to relax a little bit when things go haywire. Because one of the risks of having a young rebuilding team, when you jump on them too much, is they can lose confidence and things can spiral out of control. Payton is not used to that. I think there are good signs that he can handle that, But as Payton himself said, confidence comes from proven production, ability. You have to have seen it. We have not ever seen Sean Payton do what he's trying to do this season at the NFL level.
Yeah, but again, I keep coming back to that. I think that he is in this comfort zone because he's forced the roster to evolve to what he wanted it to be. He wanted his guys. He didn't want Jerry Jeudy.
Look at the size of the receiving corps.
Yeah, he didn't want Jerry Jeudy. He didn't want Russell Wilson. There's stuff that didn't fit. They embraced going younger. That's why Vele is on the roster and Tim Patrick is not.
Exactly.
There's just an embracing of what direction they are going right now. And as we all saw last week, Tim Patrick was very quick to sign with another team. So
he switched places with Josh Reynolds.
Right. I mean, just he was quick.
It won't take long for him to be on the field there on a very good Lions team.
Right. He found a good landing spot, and I think it's a very good spot for him to be in right now. So as far as I'm concerned, it was a win-win. Yeah, I know Broncos fans don't like to see some of their favorites leave. I'm the one ticked off that Justin Simmons isn't here anymore. But I'm also really there for sure. I'm also really happy for Simmons because
he's on a team that's
he's on a team that should make the playoffs. He's on a team that I believe if Kirk Cousins just is healthy and upright, that team should win the NFC South. I think it's Atlanta's division to win. I think if Tampa's going to make the playoffs, they're going to have to do it as a wild card because I think Atlanta is the team that can win that division because good God, the Saints offensive line is a wet Kleenex.
It's bad.
It is bad, y'all. So I think all of those things point, in my opinion, to Atlanta being able to take that division because of the defense and the moves that they made with Judon and with Simmons, adding to what they already had, and the fact that they went out and got Kirk Cousins. Yes, that raises the question about the whole Michael Penix thing that they did, but I'm not going to try to get into their minds of what they're trying to do in the future.
You got a 36-year-old quarterback coming off a season-ending Achilles injury. That's what they're thinking.
Yeah, I think that's in part what they're thinking for sure. So I think all of those things play into, like I said, I believe that he forced this roster to be more of what he wanted, and rightfully so, by the way. And I think that is something that Broncos fans need to be able to embrace. Now, if you don't see progress that you and I have been talking about, are you not entertained? If you're not entertained by this team, if you don't see a team that is far more competitive, then the moves that he did are going to become far more scrutinized. Okay. However, do not, Broncos fans, do not. If Jerry Jeudy starts putting up numbers, so what? If Atlanta's defense winds up being one of the better defenses in the National Football League, so what? It's not about that. It's not about like, oh, see, we shouldn't have gotten rid of him. Focus in on your team. Try to avoid the white noise on the outside, and you'll be just fine.
That's probably a big part of it because here I am debating with you whether they'll win 5 or 6 games, which would be a pretty awful record either way. And I'm looking back at the Broncos and thinking the last time I've been this positive about how the Broncos' future looks was probably the 2016 season. And even then, because you knew you didn't have the quarterback, you had Trevor Siemian after Peyton Manning retired and Brock Osweiler jetted off to Houston. But there was still a plan. There was still the majority of that team that won Super Bowl 50. There was still an outstanding defense, and the idea that if Siemian could just kind of keep the trains running on time, the Broncos could succeed. Now, that ended up not being able to sustain. Gary Kubiak moves on, and the Broncos have been a disaster ever since. But since Kubiak's departure following the 2016 season, this season, right here, right now, as we go into week 1, is the most bullish I've felt about the Denver Broncos since the beginning of the 2016
Isn't it
season.
Wild to consider the fact that you can be bullish about something and still be talking about a team that's going to be sub 500?
Because you're finally on the right track.
Yes.
You're doing the right things. It's not going to give you immediate rewards. And on top of that, historically, you're in a weird spot because I want you to just quickly bear with me here as I go over the quarterbacking situation just in the AFC. So I keep track of this sort of week to week, and I'll do it over the season. And yeah, you can quibble with it, but here you go. I went down the list of the quarterbacks in the AFC and said, like, all right, if I had to win a game today, who would I pick in order? Patrick Mahomes, number 1. Joe Burrow, number 2. Lamar Jackson, number 3. Josh Allen, number 4. CJ Stroud, number 5. Justin Herbert, number 6. Rodgers, number 7. Tua Tagovailoa, number 8. Trevor Lawrence, 9. Anthony Richardson, 10. Deshaun Watson, 11. I actually have Bo Nix at 12, ahead of Russell Wilson, Gardner Minshew, Drake May, and Will Levis. Or Drake May / Teddy Bridgewater, Jacoby Brissett. But look at the guys ahead. Mahomes, Burrow, Jackson, Allen, Stroud, Herbert, Rodgers. Just there alone, that's 7. The AFC right now is historically stacked with quarterbacking talent, and you're playing in a league in which passing's never been more important. Therefore, quarterbacking's never been more important. The Broncos right now would be swimming upstream no matter who they had at quarterback. So in some regards, if they have a direction and they know what they're doing, this is the best possible time to rebuild, because who are you really jumping over when I talk about those teams? Many of whom, by the way, the Broncos will play in a very difficult schedule. Realistically, who are you jumping over with Bo Nix? I know you're excited about Sean Payton. I know he's won a Super Bowl. I get it. Well, John Harbaugh's won a Super Bowl. Andy Reid's won a Super Bowl. Zach Taylor's gotten the Bengals to a Super Bowl. I mean, there's talent. There's talent in quarterbacks. There's talent in coaches. The Broncos were always going to be dealt a bad hand this season. So that's one of the other reasons I'm bullish about it. This year, they weren't ever going to make any noise anyway. Even if they make a jump to 9 wins and improve from last year, that's probably still not good enough to even get you into the wild card. So in that regard, you almost have to throw the record out. It's not relevant. To your point, Nate, be entertaining, be consistent, be in games. I talk a little bit about the Colorado Buffaloes, who won their opening game in a close fashion like we anticipated, and are probably in a heap of trouble in Nebraska this weekend. We'll talk about that maybe later in the week. But last year, one of the things that was underrated about the Buffaloes' 4-8 record is that 6 of those losses were by 1 score. Now, does that mean for sure they'll be much better this year and win all those? No. But if the Broncos lose 12 games and 9 of them are 1-touchdown games, then that's okay. You're fine with that. You probably enjoyed watching the game, even though there was a loss. You were entertained by it. You saw things you liked. You saw things that made you excited about the future. That's what it should look like. And I think that's one of the reasons why, for the first time in almost 10 years, I'm actually excited about watching the Broncos this year, because I know there's a plan. And so I'm now curious to see how far along they are on it from week to week to week. And that part, I think it's fair to be, as a fan, to say that's exciting.
Yes. And that's all you need. Right now, that is all you need out of this team, and you will be just fine. And yes, take Nebraska and lay the 7.5.
I can't even argue that, to be honest.
Actually, it's a flat 7, so you got a chance at a tie. You got a chance at a push.
Yeah, well, the defense does have to
lay the points.
Stop a nosebleed eventually. We'll talk more about that as well. Thanks to Cody Roark for joining us. You'll catch him every Tuesday right here on Mile High Sports Today. And of course, check out
off a whole lot of people
everything that he ever did. And I'm sitting next to you, but truth is
just
the truth.
Saying.
But thanks to Cody for joining us. You'll catch him every Tuesday. That'll be wonderful to have a chance to have him sit down with us and break it all down. You heard about the film studies he'll be doing. Make sure you follow Cody and get all of that. Danny Bailey's the man in the booth that makes everything work. We don't have buttons. We just have knobs. They don't even do anything, really. They just make us louder. And heaven knows you don't need that. Thanks to everyone, however you're catching the program. Click, subscribe. You know the deal. To get more, you'll know when we're on. You'll know what we'll be talking about. We'll be back at it every single weekday. Can't wait for this football season to get going. You've got it. Noon, lunchtime, right here. Nate, me, Danny, you. This is Mile High Sports Today.